This is hot off the press. The keyboard is still burning. It's from Ronnie on email. Is Claudio Ranieri to Roma really a surprise? And what are the chances that Ranieri can be a success on his return to Rome? Well, Nicky, if you've seen out there, listeners, the reception he got when he arrived at Fiumicino, and he wasn't short of a player signing for Galatasaray, was it? It was really enthusiastic.
Yeah, because that's the only thing that could make Roma fans feel a bit better right now, I think is the answer. Because kind of similar to when the club turned around after Mourinho and hired De Rossi, you've got a situation that is so toxic, so potentially awful. You've got so much anger, and the fans are really angry towards the Friedkins, the owners at the moment, and that won't go away with disappointment. That's still going to be there. The one thing that can bring a smile to everyone's faces, it feels ridiculous to say this about him because he's 73 years old, but he's the kid who grew up in Testaccio, who used to run local deliveries for his dad, who is just that much a real, true Roman and Roma supporter who is part of the community and who they love. They absolutely love him. So of all the people who could, again, just bring a smile to Roma's fans' faces right now, he might be maybe even literally the only one, because I was thinking if you brought back De Rossi, would that do it? To some extent, maybe, because a lot of people were unhappy about how he was treated, but I feel like he's still now tied up in the negative history, whereas Ranieri gets to come in as having had no part in it, not responsible for it, just gets to walk in the door being someone who is that old face everyone's happy to see. How long it will last, another question. Whether he can fix the football, whether he can detoxify the relationship between ownership and fans, a whole different question. But he's very loved in Rome.
Yeah, this honestly just feels like a PR move from the Friedkin family for me to appease supporters. And look, if a club legend like De Rossi can get chewed up and spat out by this current regime, then I don't see why Ranieri can't as well.
I mean, that's the question, really. Was De Rossi a PR move that they grew tired of?
I think it was a bit of a PR move, but then, I think at least with De Rossi, you see this young manager, you see there's somebody that they can move forward with, but this just, it reeks of a club that doesn't really have any direction or an actual course plotted by the regime that came in with a lot of bluster to say, look, we're going to take Roma forward. And we've discussed before, I think a lot of it, I think I was concerned about the Dybala move in the summer when we discussed it then, and we said, like, do they keep him around, or do they, get him off the wage bill and move on and say we're going to go a different course, we're going to have a rebuild for the next 2 or 3 years, no pressure, let's just do this. They didn't do that, and that was a big concern for me. That was a big red flag for me, and this is a huge red flag.
I mean, this is an interesting thing, isn't it, Nicky? The idea that, as you say, Roma fans are so bound up in the identity of the club at the moment and how they feel that the Friedkins have no respect for that. So the fact that they've made strides towards getting a new stadium, which they've needed for a long time, and obviously which is a very, very difficult process, especially in Italy, that they've invested a lot of money in the team this summer. I'm not sticking up for the Friedkins at all, but they must be thinking, hang on, we've done a lot. But actually their cultural insensitivity has set them back probably at a lower status than an owner who would have spent far less.
Yeah, when you said caught up in that at the moment, I'm thinking to myself at this moment and every moment since I've been aware of what's happening in Rome, I suppose. I mean, certainly back to thinking Totti starting his career in the 90s, it's always been about Roma being Roman and so bound up in that idea of being tied to the place and to the city. I think that all football clubs have their own identities, and some of those are less romantic and driven by, I mean, even if you want to stay within Italy, Juventus, where the identity is winning and that's what matters. In Rome, both clubs, Lazio and Roma, are very tied to their sense of, we are this part of being Roman, and ours, of course, is the correct part, unlike the other half of the city. And it matters. It really, really matters. And to some extent, yes, you become a victim of your own good decisions by having leaned into that very effectively at the start of your time at the club, because Harry Mourinho, even though he was not Roman, still played into that, because Mourinho was the guy who, I talked about it loads in the podcast, came here and said, I'm all the way in if you're all the way in, but you've got to come with me. And the fans said, we're all the way in with you. And it became this sense of shared identity that was so important beyond just the winning football games. It was about this idea of us all doing this thing together.
It's funny, I've spoken to Roma fans who've gone, I miss Mourinho.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't really care if the football was shit. Just not bothered.
So that's part of the cult, though, isn't it? That's the cult of Mourinho. That's what
that's true.
When he leaves somewhere, he leaves this group of fans like that, I think, who do crave for him and his presence.
Because the club had been yearning for a sense of identity, frankly, since Totti and De Rossi left as players, because so much of the identity was built around that for a long time. And that was a nightmare for a series of managers that we, again, have talked about. Certainly, you and I, Andy, have been doing shows together so long. We've talked about that through different chapters. But the new identity was created with Mourinho. Mourinho goes and you bring in De Rossi, who is back to that just pure Romanness of it. You've leaned into that very effectively. And you did give De Rossi a 3-year contract in the summer. So you really told fans, we're doing this, like this is our story, and then you swept it out from underneath them.
I mean, that's the bit that we've left out, the absolute insanity of like giving him a whole new roster of players and then no time to work with it. Yeah.
This is what I mean by no cost. You look at all the managers, Mourinho, De Rossi, Juric, and then now Ranieri. There's no similarity between any.
No, there's no link there at all, is there?
It's bizarre.
And you're right to bring up the money, Andy, because it's a lot. And I think the other figure in this who's fascinating to me is Gisolfi, the sporting director, who was also hired in the summer and who, from what we can tell, had minimal input into this managerial appointment, who himself was quite keen on bringing back De Rossi, who is still under contract. It's a mess. It really looks from the outside like a club that is just making things up on the spot rather than doing things with any sense of coherence.
So it's going to be looked after by a 73-year-old man who nevertheless has a lot of energy after his couple of months of retirement. He's also been on the socials, it appears. This one's from Claudio on X. What does Éder Militão's ACL injury mean for Real Madrid's already struggling defence? Will they make a move to replace him in January? And similarly, Billy on Instagram has said, how much will Galatasaray miss Mauro Icardi? And does an ACL injury at the age of 31 mean this could be the end of his career? Okay, before we get to Maurito, let's deal with Real Madrid and their defensive problems. Mm-hmm. Of course, Éder Militão, really unfortunate. We could see how upset Vinny Jr. was by it on the pitch. Of course, he did his other ACL in his other leg last year. It's tough for Éder Militão, but it's tough for Real Madrid. They're really stretched at the back, aren't they?
Yeah, it's a shame. Militão, before this first ACL injury, he was looking imperious. He was looking to be one of the best centre-backs in the world. Yeah. He gets that injury, sets him back, he comes back and he's barely been back and he's got another one, and you do wonder when somebody's had, 2 ACL injuries, and that was reading up apparently as well. I mean, a lot of people were like, oh, is it the same leg? Is it the same leg? Apparently the other leg is more susceptible after you've had an ACL injury in one particular, which I found interesting.
Well, in terms of the amount of continuous football that he would have been missed, it's almost like Klay Thompson in the Golden State Warriors, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it leaves Real Madrid struggling a little bit now. One bright bit of news is that David Alaba is looking very close to a comeback. He's training, he's smiling, he's looking ready. Perhaps in December he'll come back. So that's a great boost. To answer the question, whether they'll sign anybody, they have spent quite a bit of money, so I think they're looking for a low-cost signing. And
just to clarify, that low-cost signing won't be Sergio Ramos, will it?
It will not. Oh, I'd absolutely bloody love that. My word, I would absolutely relish that. But no, it is going to be another Spanish defender, at least by naturalisation, and they really want Aymeric Laporte.
Right.
And Laporte seems quite keen as well.
He spent all his time moaning about the facilities in Saudi since he's been there.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's like, why don't you shell out for a new gym then, mate? You're getting paid enough.
He's had enough, and he was often linked when he was at Athletic Bilbao. He was often linked with the move to Real Madrid and Barcelona as players who do really well. Other clubs are in Spain, and he said he's waiting for the call. He's open to the call. If Real Madrid calls me, then I'll listen. I think he'd be a great sign for Real Madrid. So it'll be interesting. It has to be low cost because they've got big plans for the summer of Mr. Trent Alexander-Arnold and Alphonso Davies as well. So they're looking at wing backs for the summer. But right now, low cost centre back will be good.
Oh, there's something to look forward to. What about Icardi though, Nicky? Of course, he went down in that Tottenham game in the Europa League, and we've only had a little bit of a taste of Osimhen and Icardi. Very exciting going forward. Quite what the defensive implications of that were. Well, we're going to have to leave that maybe until next season if Galatasaray get their way. Of course, they want to permanently sign Victor Osimhen. Good luck with that, but we never thought signing Icardi was possible, so who knows? Where does this leave Icardi, do you think?
Where does it leave Icardi? I think that's a question that's going to come down to his body and his rehabilitation, really. Like, I don't think it's implausible for a player in their 30s to come back from an ACL injury. We've seen it.
I agree.
We've seen plenty.
Especially him.
Yeah.
And especially, you have to say, before Osimhen gets the league, he's by far the best player in the league.
Yeah.
So, we've seen a bit more of an all-round game from him that we saw sort of little bit at Inter, but generally he was just the fox in the box, wasn't he?
Yeah, I'm not old enough to remember Javi Zanetti ripping his Achilles in his, I can't remember if he was quite 40 yet, he was very close to it, and got back from it, because when you're that sort of person, and Zanetti is, I think, always my number one example of someone who was just so absolutely obsessed with physical fitness and keeping his body in good shape that it was always giving himself an advantage. If you have the right mentality and the right support, there's every chance you can do it. Of course, everybody is different, and it's possible that Icardi will have some complication that I can't predict, but I don't think that being 31 is an obstacle to him coming back. But it's certainly very convenient for Galatasaray now, with this wonder of hindsight, that they happened to get this opportunity to sign, still in my opinion, and sometimes I feel like I'm shouting into the void with it, one of the absolute best number 9s on the entire planet.
Yeah,
so
100%. And I guess even though no one would have wished this on Icardi, and it is a big blow for Galatasaray, and we saw the affection and love for him in the first game they played since the injury against Samsunspor at the end. We saw Osimhen celebrating with Icardi's shirt, Osimhen pushing him forward to start the chant at the end of the game as well, so Icardi still felt part of it. Is it maybe a better thing for Galatasaray that they don't have to, because when they're both fit, they had to play them both. Okan Buruk had to play them both. Yeah. Is it better for the shape of the team that you don't have them both in the same team?
I think absolutely. And it also gives Osimhen a chance to absolutely, solidify that he is the man. And then who knows, if Icardi does come back, who's to say that Galatasaray might want to persist with him? Like, well, we've got Osimhen and he's in a good way right now.
Okay, I'm into that. We've got one here from IJ on email. I was really nervous when Vincenzo Italiano left my beloved Fiorentina, but maybe I never needed to be. We're now sitting third in Serie A after 6 consecutive wins. I told you they're getting to Ask OTC this week. Why do you think it's all going so right this season for a team that has always seemed to underachieve? And who deserves the praise for such a fantastic start?
It's got to go straight to Palladino, the manager, first of all, because I think all of us believed that team was overperforming maybe under Vincenzo Italiano, or at least that he was doing a very good job at the beginning. 2 Europa Conference League finals in successive years, as well as being competitive in the league. It was something that, especially right after the Vlahovic sale, we thought was really impressive. And right now they're doing even better. Palladino did not start that well, actually. The first few games weren't great, and he came in with this back 3 and he's adjusted it into a back 4, and he's another disciple of Gianpiero Gasperini, so we expect Palladino to always play Gasperini football, high-intensity pressing and man-to-man across the pitch. But actually, it's since they've shifted away from that to playing with a 4-man defence, to playing in a more counter-attacking way.
Yeah.
There's a better way of putting it than that. I can't think of it, but it's a quick strike way, certainly, of letting themselves sit back and absorb sometimes and lean into the skill set of some of the players they've got there at the moment, like Gudmundsson and Moise Kean. Like, he's changed the way they play in a way that suits the players he's got, which is a sign of a good manager. And certainly it helps that, yes, Moise Kean is playing some of the best football he's ever played. He scored 8 goals already this season.
Well, second highest total for a season ever, isn't it?
Yeah.
In November.
It helps that David De Gea has showed back up and is making some brilliant saves at 34 years old.
And that assist as well for Keane last week.
Well,
amazing.
Actually, big part of, again, playing in a slightly sitting deep and quick striking way. His distribution has been really, really great this season so far. So He's been fantastic. Robin Gosens, someone who I used to think was a sensational footballer, but whose career got a bit lost there for a few years. He's been playing back up to his levels. So there's some good players there. But I do think the magic has come from the manager getting them all into the right places.
Speaking of him, I want to piggyback on IJ's question a little bit and ask you, while we've got you here, Monza struggled quite a bit at the start of that season. How much of that is to do with Palladino?
Well, it's certainly a tempting question to answer. I think there was a journalist right after the 5-1 win. They had Fiorentina over Roma. A journalist basically said to Palladino, so you know that now you've basically beaten every big team in Italy. And most of that was when he was still at Monza. He's very quickly showing himself, I think, to be one of the up-and-coming managers in Italy.
From Paul on Instagram, got another question here.
Okay.
Out of 10, how smug was Andy after Lyon beat Saint-Étienne last weekend?
Just happy to have the derby back in the top flight, David, to be perfectly honest. Not as smug as Alexandre Lacazette, who, as you might have seen, when he scored the winner in the first half, did the classic NBA too short celebration, which he was joined in by his teammates as well. Now, it was interesting because it was quite an emotional moment for Lacazette. He said, you know, this is the first time I've played the derby in this stadium since they moved, because he scored a hat-trick in the last derby that was at Gerland before the move, and then, you know, he left, Saint-Étienne got relegated, etc., etc. So he said, this was my first derby in the Groupama Stadium, and it will no doubt be my last here as well, confirming what everyone thought, that he would leave at the end of the season when his contract was up. But he was building it up all week. It's almost as if he's like a little bit demob happy in terms of the way he's talking about the derby. He sat there and said, you know, no one's allowed to wear green or have any green objects in my house. And, you know, he was very like leaning into his Lyonness before it as well, which is quite interesting. Of course, there are a few players, including Lucas Perry, who had a very good game, who can't be that far from a recall to the Brazil squad, who were amazed at their first bit of the derby as well. But I think we've talked about what Liga has lost really over the last couple of years, and I do think we talked about in the main show about De Zerbi, San Pauli. I do think you need games like this as well, because there was a brilliant thing. I don't know if people watching the broadcast probably won't have seen this, but there was a second goal right near the end for Lyon, which was disallowed somewhat controversially because it was given as a handball by George Mikatadze, setting up the goal for Ernest Nuama. What happened is Gaëtan Larsonneur, the Saint-Étienne goalkeeper, tried to dribble it out, miscontrolled, made a mess of it, fired it into Mikatadze, and it broke free for Nuama to put it in. Now, there's a great bit of footage, and in fact a couple of bits of footage from behind the goal of Lyon fans, and they're getting into it with Larsonneur, and he's giving them some back. He's obviously not really concentrating, and that's when he muffs his kick. And then he gets really, really annoyed when it leads to a goal, and he gets a bit let off. But it's quite funny. He's turning around and blaming the fans for the goal.
I love that.
It's wonderful to see. So look, it's not really about my smugness. It's about the fact that I think Liga needs a bit of this.
Was John Textor still smug? Because I noticed before the game he said he wanted to humiliate Saint-Étienne. But it wasn't quite a humiliation, wasn't it?
No. In fact, Saint-Étienne played really well.
Yeah.
They played it like a derby. They played well above themselves. They were excellent, I thought. But yeah, Textor came on the pitch at the end. He was in the dressing room as well, and he had like text printed on the back of his shirt. I mean, honestly, I mean, I don't know if that's going to cover the fact that they've got some really worrying financial news that's just leaked out, which is no surprise to anyone who's really followed the story.
Would he have a clue about it? I just keep remember that clip from the summer when they said about the figures, and he goes, actually, I don't have the figures. I don't really know the figures as well.
He definitely didn't have them on Sunday night.
Right.
I can tell you that. Anyway, from one chaotically run institution to another, this one's from Ethan on email. As a Manchester United season ticket holder, I can't help but feel a bit put out when new kick-off times are proposed at 8 p.m. on a Saturday or 6:30 p.m. on a Sunday. While I love watching my team play, moving away from the traditional kick-off times seems driven more by TV audiences than by consideration for match-going fans. Here, Ethan. But then I think of European teams who regularly play at 9 p.m. on weekends and throughout the week, even on Sundays. I always wondered how fans of European teams feel about this. Does it feel normal to them, part of their fan culture, or do they just make do with what they're given? Now, of course, there's always a thought about Falcao saying, 10 p.m. kickoff was on a Sunday night was past his bedtime, which has always stuck with me when he's at Atletico Madrid. The other thing that I thought of when I was thinking about Ethan's question here, Nicky, is when the first series of Gomorrah was on, and obviously based in Naples, if you've not seen it, crime drama, very, very gripping. A lot of Napoli ultras really into it. They had their game against Juventus on a Friday night, and for one Friday only, after a lot of protests to Sky Italia from those Napoli fans, for one Friday only, the episode of Gomorrah was moved on to, I think, 5 to midnight or something like that, so they could all get home from the Juventus game to watch it.
That's a brilliant example of the different culture around late nights, and it's true.
But it's important to have a life outside football as well, isn't it? For
absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's just cultural difference in terms of what your hours are. Actually, to a great extent, I have a memory of, don't know why this memory always sticks with me, but like I remember going to a Rome derby one year and coming back, and I was staying in a neighbourhood that's quite young, and it was a Sunday night, and I think I got back to where I was staying at 10:30 at night, and every restaurant and bar was just packed with young people. And you think it's a Sunday night, it's Monday morning, tomorrow people have got to go to work, and it's 10:30 and it's still packed. It's just a different culture in terms of the hours people live, and I am certain that's even, I think it's maybe feels to me like it's even more true in Spain.
Absolutely.
Where my even more ridiculous personal anecdote is I just much younger person that I was. I remember going to Barcelona one time when I was just on holiday with some friends, and all being English, and going to a nightclub on a weeknight. And we got there at 11 o'clock, and we were the first people in the door.
Oh, you can't go at 11 o'clock. That's still pre-drinks. You can't go to the club in Spain until about 2 a.m. Like, you cannot, honestly.
On a weeknight.
I made that mistake in my infancy when I first went to Spain, but then I soon learned. It's a massive, getting back to the to the TV times and what have you, it's a massive point of contention in Spain, especially over Friday and Monday night games, especially Monday. But the issue is, fan culture in Spain isn't particularly strong compared to Germany, compared to Italy,
of course.
England.
Remember, German fans got Monday night games binned, didn't they, as part of the last TV deal?
And I think, Spanish fans would ideally like that. There's already been several protests this season. Alaves, for one example, turned up 5 minutes late to kick off, so the camera pictures would show everybody piling in then and show the empty stands basically at the start of the game. And ticket prices have increased in Spain as well. So not only have you got late kickoffs on inconvenient days, you've also got increased ticket prices as well. And it does feel, as football continues to move on, that everything is catered towards the TV spectacle and the production there. If you just need to look at the production now of different TV companies and how they present their games, they've got referees in there, they've got VAR experts in there, they've got everything around it. The production is, everything to them. They don't care particularly about the fans, if at all.
But as we found out during COVID, if the fans aren't there, the televisual spectacle isn't really worth watching.
No,
is
it isn't. Look, and for most of the time now, with all their production value, I don't really find it too watchable, to be honest with you, anywhere. So it's disappointing, but this is only going to get worse. And it's, everybody always says, when the TV deal bubble, eventually bursts, then we'll see a radical change in things. But when is it going to burst? I just think there's more tournaments, there's more things going to be bought. But as you've seen in France as well, a lot of TV deals are getting, fallen through and crumbled.
If we take it just back to the kickoffs, David, in Ethan's question, in the years you lived in Spain, how awkward did you find it combining work and social life? Especially as you're, there trying to meet people and stuff.
I honestly didn't find it too bad. I quite enjoyed it. But look,
you never went to bed?
I never went to bed. I was younger then. Yeah, either you went to a bar and had some food. I mean, God, I lived in Valencia. When I lived in Valencia, I felt like they ate later than every other part of Spain. So I was sometimes eating at 11:30 midnight, and I was like, all right, okay, I don't really mind this, to be honest with you. But I was young, but and then the next day, a lot of my shifts started at 11 o'clock for the company that I worked for at the time as well, for the for being Sports, who I worked for, because it was based in America. So I started about 11 or 12 in the afternoon, which was fine to me. But think of these people who were going to work at 7, going to 8. You got travel to to take into account as well. I think it's really disappointing, and that's why Spain, I think a lot of the time, hasn't really got that away day football culture, because they're not allowed it because of how late games are a lot of the time, and how inconvenient it is. You don't want to be going to a game across the country it's 9 o'clock kickoff on a Monday night.
It's the scale of the country as well, isn't it? Exactly. It's maybe logistically not possible sometimes.
Yeah, that's far different. We forget how small England is sometimes. As much as the ticket prices are absolutely extortionate of trains and such like that, it is much smaller, whereas Spain is a lot more difficult to go from Barcelona to Seville, or even further in the north. Say you're a team in the north of Spain, and you're Galicia or Asturias, who's going to Seville or Andalusia.
It's the same in Italy with north to south. Less so because a lot of the teams are bunched together in the north. But if you're travelling from Udine down to Naples, that's a heck of a trip.
Yeah. Well, we're all off for an early night after that. Thank you for listening to Ask OTC. If you would like to ask a question, you can contact us, of course, anytime at Andy Brassel, at Nicky Bandini, at David Jacker, or at OTC Pod. And you can also email us, otc@footballramble.com.